Dear students, you are most welcome to this virtual class of today. Dear students, as you know, I am your well familiar VN Misra from Sadgur Inter College, Semrawa, Barabanki. Dear students, as you know, we have read the first lesson from the snapshots book and now we are on the second lesson and the name of this lesson is The Address by Marga Minko. Dear students, I know that you have well prepared the first lesson, the summer of the beautiful white horse. So, without making any delay, let us start with the second lesson, that is The Address. Dear students, let me tell you that Marga Minko actually is not the real name. It's a pen name, we say pseudonym. Pseudonym is the name which is used generally by a writer to disguise himself or herself. For Sarah Menko. Sarah Menko is the real name of the writer of this lesson and the name of the lesson is The Address. Today we will take up the first half part, means first part of this lesson today. Dear students, as you know, for proper and smooth study, it is at most necessary that we must be aware of the content we have to read. Dear students, let me tell you, we will take explanation of the text, we will take difficult words, and also I will introduce you important questions and answers, including multiple choice questions. So, dear students, let me tell you what will you know after going through this lesson. Dear students, when the present session is over, you will be able to explain the text. You will be able to define and use the words, phrases in your own sentences. You will be able to answer the questions based on the text. And besides, it will empower your reading and receiving. One more thing is there, student, that is, the lesson is written in at most simple words. Therefore, it will be very interesting for you to read. Dear students, for the proper understanding of the story, let me make you aware of the characters of the story. The first one is the narrator Marga Minko herself. The second one is Mrs. S, mother of the narrator. The third one is Mrs. Darling, an acquaintance of the narrator's mother. And the fourth and the last one is a girl of 15, daughter of Mrs. Darling. So there are only 4 characters. Now dear students, before we actually start with the lesson, let me ask you a question. Have you ever lent anything valuable to your friend or somebody else? And suppose if he or she hasn't returned the thing to you, how have you felt? Actually, such is the case with the narrator of the story, who the writer herself is. Actually, during the war, means Holland War, the narrator's mother gave her valuable to one of her friends so that those valuable things might be kept safe during the war if they might be sent to a shelter house. The mother dies and the daughter now comes to the doorstep of the old friend of her mother to take those valuable things. Let us read what answer the house owner gives to this narrator. Now come up to the text. Do you still know me? I asked. Means the narrator of this story asked the woman to whom her mother had given her valuable things during the wartime, Holland War. The woman looked at me. Means the owner of that house looked at the narrator searchingly, means fleetingly, means hastily. She had opened the door a chink. A chink means a bit, means she did not open the door completely or fully. Came closer means came closer to the narrator, and stood on the step means the woman went on standing at the doorstep. No, I don't knew means the woman means the owner of the house said that she did not know the narrator. I am Mrs. S. daughter. The narrator told the woman that she was the daughter of Mrs. S. She heard her name on the doorstep, though she wanted to prevent it opening any further. Means she held her hand on the door, means she did not move her hand, means she kept on putting her hand on the door because she did not want to open the door fully so that the narrator might go in. Anyway, her face gave absolutely no sign of recognition. She kept staring at me in silence. Means it was obvious. It seemed that she did not recognize the narrator, means she did not know the narrator. She kept staring at me without giving an eye wink. She went on looking at the narrator. Perhaps I was mistaken. The narrator thinks perhaps she had come to wrong house. I thought perhaps isn't her. Perhaps she is not the woman to whom she had to go. I had seen her only once. The narrator says that she had seen this woman only once, fleetingly means hastily, and that was years ago, means this incident when she saw the narrator was long ago. It was most probable that I had rung the wrong bell, means the narrator thinks that she might have done a mistake in coming to this house. The woman let go the door and stepped to the inside, means she stepped inside the house of her. The woman let go the door and stepped to the side, means she moved aside. And she was wearing my mother's green knitted cardigan. Be careful, there will be question. Means she was wearing a cardigan which was knitted by the mother of the narrator herself. The wooden buttons rather pale from washing, means the buttons of this cardigan were of wood. She saw that I was looking at the cardigan, half hid herself again behind the door, but I knew now I was right. Means she tried to hide the buttons of the cardigan so that the narrator might not recognize her, but still the narrator recognized her, saw her. Well, you knew my mother? I asked. The narrator asked if she knew the mother of the narrator. Have you come back? Said the woman. I thought no one had come back. Pay attention. Have you come back means have you returned from the shelter house where you and your family, means you and your mother, had been sent during the wartime? The woman said the woman, I thought that no one had come back, only me, means the narrator answered that only she had come back. Now, come up to the next page. A door opened and closed in the passage behind her. Means there was way behind her, behind the woman, means behind this woman. A musty smell emerged. Musty means wet, means there was damp smell behind her. I regret I cannot do anything for you. Means the owner of this house said that she was sorry and she could not do anything for the narrator. I have come here especially on train. The narrator told her that she had gone to that house on train. I wanted to talk to you for a moment, and she told that she wanted to talk to the woman for a moment, for a short while. It is not convenient for me now, said the woman. I can't see you about any time. She told that she could not meet her that time because that was not the appropriate time to meet her, and she said that she would meet her any other time. She nodded and cautiously closed the door. Nodded means to indicate as if someone wants to say yes. Nod means to shake head in this way, up and down. And shake is the indication to say no. This shake, nod, yes. That is. She nodded and cautiously closed the door as though no one inside the house should be disturbed. Means she very cautiously means very carefully she closed the door. Perhaps she wanted that nobody of the house should be disturbed. I stood where I was on the step which the narrator went on standing at the step where she had been up to yet. The curtain in front of the bay window. Bay window means a window projecting towards the outside of the wall. moved. Someone stared at me and would then have asked what I wanted. Oh, nothing. The woman would have said it was nothing. Perhaps the narrator thinks that perhaps anybody inside the house would have asked the owner of the house, means this woman who was there at the door, and the owner of this house would have answered the family member, that there was none at the door, because the owner of this house perhaps did not want to disturb anybody else in the family. I looked at the nameplate again, means the narrator looked at the nameplate. Darling, it said, means it was written there, darling, in black letters on white enamel. Enamel coating, means in white coating there was written the name darling, and on the jump, means on the boundary of it, a bit higher, the number 46, and the house number was 46, that was written on the nameplate. As I walked slowly back to the station, I thought about my mother who had given me the address years ago. Now the narrator returned from the house, and again she started thinking of her past, means now the story goes in flashback. It had been in the first half of the war, means during the first half portion of the war, I was home for a few days, means the narrator was at home for a few days, and it struck me immediately, means it occurred her immediately that something or other about the room had changed, means she found that there was some changing in her room. I missed various things. She also found that some of her things were missing. My mother was surprised. I should have noticed so quickly, means her mother had never thought that this girl, means the narrator, would ever think of those things which were missing at this time. Then my mother was surprised. I should have noticed so quickly. Then she told me about Mrs. Darling. Means now the narrator's mother told about Mrs. Darling. I had never heard of her, but apparently she was an old acquaintance. Acquaintance is familiar, known of my mother, means she did not know anything about this woman, means about Mrs. Darling. The name of this house owner was Mrs. Darling, whom she hadn't seen for years, means the narrator hadn't seen this woman for years. She had suddenly turned up, means one day she suddenly came and renewed their contact, and now she began to come regularly to the mother of the narrator. Since then she had come regularly. Every time she lives here, means whenever she would go from our house, means narrator says, whenever she went out of the house of the narrator, something home with her, means she would carry something with her. Certainly she would carry something with her, said my mother. She took all the table silver in one go, and then the antique plates that hung there. She had trouble lugging those large vases, means at first round she took silver things with her, silver table etc. with her, and in second time she took antique things, antique plates etc. with her. She had trouble lugging, means carrying those large vases, means in carrying those large vases there was difficulty with her. And I am worried she got a crick in her back from the crockery, means because of carrying the crockery there was a crick in her back. Kick, a kind of sprain, you can say simply. My mother shook her head pityingly, means with kindness my mother shook her head. I would never have dared ask her. She suggested it to me herself. She even insisted she wanted to save all my nice things if we have to leave here and shall lose everything, she says. Means the mother of the narrator tried to convince the narrator that if those things, those valuable things would be kept at their own house, they might lose their things. So it was safe in the house of the friend of the mother of the narrator, means those things were safe in the house of Mrs. Darling, who was the friend of the narrator's mother. Have you agreed with her that she would keep everything? I asked. Means the narrator, there was suspicion in the mind of the narrator. She was not sure that all those things would be kept safe in the house of Mrs. Darling. As if that's necessary, my mother cried. Means cryingly, her mother asked if that was necessary to ask the question. Such questions should not be asked. It would simply be an insult to talk that. Means it is an insulting manner to ask anybody if he would keep those things safe at her or his house or not. And think about the risk she is running each time she goes out of the road with a full suitcase or bag. Means the narrator must think of the risk that she was ready to take while she was keeping those valuable things at her own house. Now, dear students, let me explain you some difficult words. Dear students, you are well familiar with the fact that the strength of a language depends upon the words. Therefore, be very careful. I have taken here some specific words and let me explain you. Chink, a narrow opening, simply you can say sprain. Here I have taken the root meaning. Okay, here we have taken the root meaning. You can simply say sprain. Sometimes when you bend or you suddenly stand up, there is sprain. Or sometimes when you put your foot any place that is not even, you get a sprain. Prevent means to stop. Fleetingly, briefly or short timing. Probable, likely. Musty, wet, damp. Nodded, moved head up and down. I have explained you during our teaching. Yes, you must have listened carefully, I know. Then bay window, window projecting outside. Enamel, coating, and charm, threshold. Threshold simply you can say boredom. Now, dear students, before the commencement of the next page, tell me house number of Mrs. Darling. First tell me house number of Mrs. Darling. House number of Mrs. Darling. Let me check whether you are, I know you are attentive. Still, it's my duty to ask. Yes, very good. House number 46. Further, you will have to keep in mind the address of this woman because there will be questions on it. Okay. Now, let's proceed further. Now, dear friends, come up to the next page. My mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly, and after that we spoke no more about it. My mother seemed to notice means the mother of the narrator tried to explain the narrator that Mrs. Darling was taking her valuables to her own house so that she might keep them safe at her house while the narrator and her mother were sent to a shelter house during the wartime. But the narrator was not convinced. As reason, my mother noticed that I was not entirely convinced, means the narrator was not entirely convinced. She looked at me reprovingly, means in a criticizing manner, the mother of the narrator looked at her. And after that, we spoke no more about it. Now there was silence. No conversation was there. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station. Be careful. Up to yet, the story was in flashback, and now the story is at its usual pace. Meanwhile, I had arrived at the station without paid much attention to the things on the way. Means now the narrator had reached the station without taking any special notice the things on the way. I was walking in familiar places again for the first time since the war. Means since the war, she haven't gone those places. Now it was the first chance after the war. She was going through those ways. But I did not want to go further than was necessary. Means since her target was to take those things back, and therefore she did not want to go further. Only the necessary steps she wanted to take. Anyway, let's go up to the next line. I didn't want to upset myself with the sight of the streets and houses full of memories from precious time. Means now she did not want to remember those places, those streets, those houses that were closely associated with her past. In the train back, I saw Mrs. Darling in front of me again. Means now she remembers Mrs. Darling. She is not, means Mrs. Darling is not before her. She remembers. Means Mrs. Darling did not go to the station or in the train with the narrator. But the narrator says, she saw in front of her. Means in her memory, she thinks, as I had the first time I met her. Means now she remembers the incident when the narrator met this woman, means Mrs. Darling, for the first time. It was the morning after the day my mother had told me about her. I had got up late and coming downstairs I saw my mother about to see someone out. A woman with a broad bag. Means one day it happened so, the narrator woke up late in the morning. She found that her mother had gone outside the door to see someone off. See off means to go to send somebody up, outside of the house. This my daughter, said my mother. Means the mother of the narrator introduced her daughter, means the narrator, saying that she was her daughter. She beckoned to me. Beckoned means indicated with finger. With index fingers especially. This is index finger and this is beckoning. And therefore, she beckoned to me means indicating with the index finger, she called me. The woman nodded. I have told you nodded. The woman nodded and picked up the suitcase. Means she took the suitcase under the coat rack. She wore a brown coat and a shapeless hat. Means this woman, Mrs. Darling, at the time was wearing shapeless hat and brown coat. Does she live far away? Means the narrator asked. I asked. Seeing the difficulty she had going out of the house with the heavy case, since she was wearing the heavy case, therefore it was difficult for her to go outside the house. The narrator asked if she lived far away. In Marconi Street, said my mother, number 46. Remember that. Now the address. Now the address is revealed. Marconi Street and house number 46. Next paragraph. I had remembered it, means the narrator remembered this. But I had waited a long time to go there, but she did not go there for a long time. Initially, means in the beginning, after the liberation, means after the freedom, means after the freedom of Holland, I was absolutely not interested in all that stored stuff. Now there was a change in her mood. She was not interested in those things of the past. Absolutely not interested. Absolutely means completely. And naturally, I was also rather afraid of it. Means now she neither liked them and nor it was easy for her to accept because she had a fear about it. Afraid means to have fear. Afraid of being confronted with things that had belonged to a connection that no longer excited. Means now there was no more excitement for those things which were hidden away in cupboards and boxes and waiting in vain until they were put back in their places again. Means now those things were kept hidden in almirahs, boxes, drawers, and therefore since they had not been put again in their proper places, therefore they had no any excitement which had endured all those years because they were things. Means those things like persons had to endure the borings. Borings means tiring. Means when you are not interested in anything, you feel tired, you feel bored. The narrator therefore says, because they are things, therefore they kept hidden in the boxes and they were bored there. But gradually everything became more normal. Means now the mood of the narrator began to change. Bread was getting to be a lighter color. Means bread was changing its color. There was a bed you could sleep in unthreatened. Means there was a room, a single room where the narrator lived at this time, where she could sleep without any fear. Unthreatened means without any fear. A room with a view you were more used to glancing each day, and she was habitual of seeing that room every day. And one day I noticed I was curious about all the possessions. Means now the narrator had returned from the shelter house and now she was living in a single room. Her mother had died. But one day she thought that she must have all those things of her past. That must still be at the address. I wanted to see them, touch, remember. Means now she wanted to touch all the valuable things of her past and remember them. After my first visit in vain to Mrs. Darling's house, means the first visit was useless. In vain means useless. I decided to try a second time. Now she decided to go one more time. Now a girl about 15 opened the door to me. Now it was the daughter of Mrs. Darling whose age was 15 years. She opened the door. And her mother was at home. Sorry, I asked if her mother was at home. This narrator asked if her mother was present at home. No, she said, my mother is doing an errand. Means her mother had gone outside for a small task. No matter, I said, I will wait for her. The narrator said that she would wait for the mother of the girl. Now, let me take some difficult words so that I may explain you. Now, dear students, take these meanings down in your notebooks. Lugging means carrying, especially carrying by dragging. Carrying by dragging, reprovingly in a criticizing way. Initially, at first. Liberation, freedom. Unthreatened, fearlessly. Errand, a very short journey to take something for someone. I know that you have taken down these meanings, so let's proceed towards the question and answers. I will take multiple choice questions in this part, and in the second part we will take up questions having answers in 3 or 4 lines. Okay, so students, the first question is, I looked at blank space, again, face, house, nameplate, mother. Means you have to choose the right option for the blank space, and the answer should be from your text. Means the words you have to choose from your text. Means nameplate here is the correct answer. I looked at the nameplate again. The second one is, my mother seemed to notice that I was not entirely convinced, agreed, ready, disappointed. Convinced is the correct answer. The third one is, on the second visit, the narrator found Mrs. Darling. Found the friend of Mrs. Darling, cousin of Mrs. Darling, daughter of Mrs. Darling, mother of Mrs. Darling, daughter of Mrs. Darling is the correct answer. And the next one is here, it is written, self-practice work. You have to use the following words in your own sentences, and the words are apparently, beckoned, nodded, in vain, acquaintance. Only 5 words are there which you have to use in your own sentences. Now, dear students, in the second part, we will take the rest portion of this lesson, and we will take many descriptive questions which are important for examination. So, you should read the rest portion by yourself so that when I teach that portion, you may understand well. Thanks for watching us.